I faked having amnesia after my wedding to avoid the marriage, but what I learned during those lost weeks destroyed everything. The plan seemed foolproof. Trip down the church steps, hit my head, and wake up with convenient memory loss. Anything to escape marrying Kieran, a man my parents chose for his family's pharmaceutical empire, not because I loved him. What I didn't anticipate was how much people reveal when they think you can't remember. She's finally manageable, Kieran whispered outside my hospital room. No more stubborn streak. The doctor says trauma can completely change personality. I kept my eyes closed, staying limp while my mind raced. Perfect timing, came my mother's voice. The inheritance clause kicks in next month. Once she's declared mentally incompetent, you'll control both her trust fund and pharmaceutical patents. Patents? What patents? I was a 22-year-old college dropout who'd never invented anything. For 3 weeks, I played confused bride while secretly investigating. During physical therapy, I snuck into offices and searched databases. What I discovered made me sick. My late grandfather hadn't just left money. He'd left ownership of 17 pharmaceutical patents worth over $40 million. Patents that would revert to my parents if I was deemed unfit. The marriage wasn't about love. It was about stealing my inheritance. But the worst revelation came from Kieran's unlocked phone. Text messages dating back months showed detailed planning between him, my parents, and his family doctor, instructing him to gradually drug me with psychiatric medications before the wedding. The dizzy spells, the memory lapses, the anxiety attacks that made everyone worry about my mental health. None of it was natural. They'd been systematically poisoning me to build a case for incompetency. The lawyers confirmed everything, my father said during a private call. Once the neurologist signs off on permanent brain damage, we can have her committed. Kieran gets the patents, we get our cut, she disappears. That night, I made my move. While Kieran slept beside my bed, I photographed every message and found medication vials in his jacket. The next morning, I smiled brightly at my loving husband. Kieran, sweetheart, I remember everything now. His face drained of color. Everything. Every conversation. Every text about stealing my inheritance. Every pill you've been crushing into my food. I held up his phone and pressed play on a recorded conversation about my tragic accident. Kieran lunged for the device, but I was pressing the nurse call button. What have you done? He hissed. What you should have expected from someone who owns 17 pharmaceutical patents. I called the FBI yesterday. As security restrained my panicking husband, he screamed, "You can't prove the medications came from me." I pulled out the vials. Your fingerprints are all over these. Plus, the hospital tested my blood. But as agents led him away, Kieran turned back with a chilling smile. You think you've won? Check your grandfather's real will. The one your parents have been hiding? My heart stopped. What are you talking about? There's a reason they were desperate to marry you before your 23rd birthday next month. The patents aren't the real treasure. I stared at the empty doorway long after they'd dragged him away. The nurse was asking if I needed anything, but I couldn't hear her over the sound of blood rushing in my ears. What did he mean, the real treasure? What could possibly be worth more than $40 million in pharmaceutical patents? My parents arrived an hour later, faces masks of concern and confusion. Sweetheart, what's this about Kieran being arrested? Mom asked, settling into the bedside chair she'd occupied for weeks. The police called us, but it makes no sense. I studied their faces, the same faces that had whispered about having me committed just days ago. I remembered, I said simply, everything. Dad's briefcase hit the floor with a thud. Mom's hand flew to her throat. The drugs, the planning, the inheritance theft, all of it. Honey, you're still confused, Mom said, but her voice was shaking. The accident, there was no accident. I cut her off. I faked the amnesia to get out of the marriage. But you know what? I'm glad I did, because it helped me discover what kind of people raised me. The color drained from Dad's face. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. The FBI has Kieran's phone with all your text messages. They have the medication vials with his fingerprints. They have blood tests showing I was being systematically drugged. My parents exchanged a look that confirmed everything. But before they take you away, I continued, I want to know about grandfather's real will. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Kieran mentioned it right before they arrested him. He said the patents aren't the real treasure, that there's a reason you were desperate to marry me off before my 23rd birthday. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Try again. They sat in silence for a full minute. Finally, Mom broke. Your grandfather was eccentric, she whispered. The will, there were conditions we thought were too ridiculous to honor. What conditions? Dad loosened his tie. He left instructions that on your 23rd birthday, you were to receive the location of his private collection. Private collection of what? Another pause. Then Mom spoke, her voice barely audible. Art, worth over $200 million. The room spun. What? Your grandfather spent 60 years secretly acquiring masterpieces, Dad said. Paintings, sculptures, artifacts. He had them appraised shortly before he died. The collection is worth more than our entire pharmaceutical business. And you were going to steal that too? We were protecting you, Mom insisted. You were 22. Irresponsible. What would you do with that kind of wealth? Your grandfather's stipulations were impossible. What stipulations? Dad pulled out his phone, scrolled through files, and showed me a document. You had to be unmarried on your 23rd birthday. You had to demonstrate financial independence for at least 1 year. And you had to pass a psychological evaluation proving you were of sound mind. I stared at the screen, pieces clicking into place. So you arranged a marriage to make me ineligible. You drugged me to make me seem mentally unstable. And you controlled my money to prevent financial independence. They said nothing. Where is this collection? We don't know, Mom said. The location is sealed in a vault at Grandpa's law firm. It can only be accessed by you on your birthday after meeting all conditions. Which law firm? Sterling, Whitmore and Associates, downtown. I'd never heard of them, but that didn't matter now. Get out, I said. Honey, Mom reached for my hand. Get out. They scrambled for their belongings and rushed toward the door. Just before leaving, Dad turned back. The FBI will want to interview you about Kieran, he said. But remember, we're still your parents. We still love you. No, I replied. Parents don't drug their children. Parents don't steal their inheritance. Parents don't try to have them committed to steal their money. After they left, I called the one person I could trust. My best friend Zara, who'd tried to talk me out of the marriage from the beginning. Oh my God, she breathed after I explained everything. Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you? Actually, yes. Can you help me with something that might be illegal? Always. 2 hours later, Zara arrived with a wheelchair, civilian clothes, and a fake discharge paper she'd somehow produced. My cousin works in medical records, she explained, wheeling me toward the elevator. She owed me a favor. We made it to the parking garage without incident. As we drove toward downtown, I filled her in on the grandfather's collection. 200 million? Zara whistled. Your family's insane for trying to steal that. The question is, what happens now? I need to stay unmarried, financially independent, and mentally stable for another 3 weeks. Well, the unmarried part is easy since your husband's in jail. Financial independence might be harder. Do you have access to your own money? I checked my phone. My bank accounts had been frozen, probably by my parents. Nope, but I have an idea. We drove to Kieran's apartment, a sleek penthouse his pharmaceutical money had bought. Using the spare key he'd given me during our engagement, we let ourselves in. This feels wrong, Zara whispered as we searched through his belongings. He tried to steal my inheritance and have me committed. I think taking back some wedding gifts is fair. In his bedroom closet, I found a jewelry box containing the diamond necklace he'd given me for our engagement. The appraisal certificate showed it was worth $35,000. This should cover expenses for 3 weeks, I said, pocketing it. But as we prepared to leave, I noticed something odd. Kieran's desk drawer was slightly open, and inside I could see the edge of a document. Wait, I told Zara, pulling out the paper. It was a medical report from Dr. Harrison Vance, the family doctor who'd been helping drug me. But this wasn't about me. It was about my grandfather. According to the report, my grandfather had suffered from early-stage dementia in his final years. The document suggested his mental state was questionable when he'd written his will. They were planning to contest the will, I said, showing Zara the report. They were going to claim grandfather wasn't mentally competent when he made it. Can they do that? If they have medical evidence, maybe. But look at the date. Zara squinted at the paper. This report was written 3 months after your grandfather died. Exactly, it's fraudulent. I photographed the document and sent it to my phone. This was evidence of an even deeper conspiracy. We left Kieran's apartment and drove to a jewelry store in the Arts District. The owner, an elderly woman named Delphine, examined my engagement necklace with a loupe. $35,000 is accurate, she said, but I can only offer you $25,000 for immediate cash. Done. With money in hand, Zara and I found a small hotel where I registered under a false name. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly alone with my thoughts. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. FBI wants to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. Federal Building downtown. Agent Rodriguez. I showed Zara the message. They probably want your testimony against Kieran and your parents, she said. This could be good. If they're building a case, you'll have legal protection. But I was worried about something else. What if my parents try to have me declared mentally incompetent before my birthday? They could petition a court, claim the amnesia damaged my judgment. With what evidence? You just exposed their entire conspiracy. They're desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I was right to be worried. The next morning, Zara woke me with urgent news. Your parents just filed a petition for emergency guardianship, she said, shoving her phone at me. It's all over the local news. I read the headline, Pharmaceutical Heiress's Parents Seek Guardianship After Wedding Day Brain Injury. The article painted me as a tragic figure whose head injury had caused paranoid delusions about being drugged. It quoted family sources, saying I'd made false accusations against my devoted husband and was clearly unfit to manage my inheritance. They're trying to control the narrative, I said. Make me look crazy before I can prove they're the criminals. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Can you be ready? I was already getting dressed. I need to see that FBI agent first, and then I need to visit Sterling, Whitmore and Associates. Why the law firm? You can't claim the inheritance for another 3 weeks. No, but I can find out more about my grandfather's collection. Maybe there's something that will help me fight this guardianship petition. The FBI meeting was surreal. Agent Rodriguez was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who laid out the case against Kieran and my parents like she was reading a grocery list. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, well, in this case, adult child abuse, financial exploitation, possibly attempted murder, depending on what those drugs could have done to you long-term. What do you need from me? Your testimony, medical records, any additional evidence you might have. I showed her the fraudulent medical report about my grandfather. Agent Rodriguez studied it carefully. This could be crucial. It shows premeditation to contest the will on false grounds. Where did you find this? Kieran's apartment. You broke into his apartment? I used a key he gave me. We were married. She smiled grimly. Technically legal. This document will help our case significantly. What about the guardianship petition? That's a civil matter, not criminal. But our investigation should support your competency. The fact that you uncovered this conspiracy shows clear mental acuity. After the FBI meeting, Zara and I drove to the law offices of Sterling, Whitmore and Associates. The building was old but elegant, filled with dark wood and leather-bound books. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s, looked up when I introduced myself. Ms. Whitmore will want to see you immediately, she said, her eyes wide. She's been waiting for this call for months. Helena Whitmore was a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s, who moved with the energy of someone half her age. She led us into a conference room lined with oil paintings. "I was your grandfather's lawyer for 30 years, she began. "And I've been watching your family's attempts to circumvent his will with great interest. You know about the pharmaceutical patents?" "Oh, my dear girl, the patents were just the appetizer. Your grandfather knew your parents would try to steal them, so he made them easy to trace. He wanted you to discover their greed before you inherited the real treasure. The art collection, among other things." She pulled out a thick file. "Your grandfather was far more than a pharmaceutical entrepreneur. He was a collector, an investor, and most importantly, a planner." She opened the file and spread documents across the table. "The art collection is worth $200 million, as your parents discovered, but that's housed in a climate-controlled warehouse in Switzerland. What they don't know about is the wine collection worth $50 million, the rare book collection worth $30 million, or the technology patents he filed under various corporate names worth another $100 million. I felt dizzy. How much total? Approximately $400 million. Zara grabbed my arm to steady me. "But here's the truly brilliant part," Ms. Whitmore continued. "Your grandfather suspected your parents might try to have you declared incompetent, so he built in protections." She pulled out another document. "If anyone attempts to contest your inheritance or have you declared unfit, the entire estate transfers immediately to charity. Your parents get nothing. They don't know this. They know about the original will, which mentions only the patents and art. They never saw the codicils your grandfather added in his final years. What about the guardianship petition they filed?" Ms. Whitmore's smile was sharp. "They just triggered the charity clause. The moment they filed that petition, they forfeited any claim to your grandfather's estate. So I get everything? If you meet the original conditions, yes. Unmarried on your 23rd birthday, financially independent for 1 year, and mentally competent." "I've only been financially independent for 2 days. "Actually, you've been financially independent since you turned 18. She showed me bank statements I'd never seen before. "Your grandfather set up a trust that paid you a monthly stipend. Your parents intercepted the payments and deposited them into an account they controlled. But legally, you were financially independent. They were just stealing from you. For 4 years? 4 years of $2,000 monthly, plus interest. They owe you about $100,000. Can I access those funds now?" "Already taken care of." She handed me a debit card. "The account has been unfrozen and is in your name only." I stared at the card, overwhelmed by everything I was learning. "There's one more thing," Ms. Whitmore said gently. "Your grandfather left you a letter. He asked me to give it to you when you turned 23, but given recent circumstances..." She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's familiar handwriting. I opened it with shaking fingers. "My dearest granddaughter," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you've discovered your parents' true nature. I'm sorry you had to learn this painful truth, but I hoped preparing you for it would make you stronger." I wiped away tears and continued reading. "I knew they would try to steal from you. I knew they would try to control you. That's why I built so many protections into your inheritance. But money isn't the real gift I'm leaving you. The real gift is freedom. Freedom from people who would use you. Freedom from a family that sees you as a commodity. Freedom to build the life you choose, not the life they choose for you. You are braver and stronger than you know. Trust yourself. And remember, you owe them nothing." It was signed, "With all my love, Grandpa Theodore." I sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything. "What happens now?" I finally asked Ms. Whitmore. "Now? You prepare for your 23rd birthday. The guardianship hearing will likely be dismissed once the judge learns about the criminal charges against your parents. And in 3 weeks, you'll officially become one of the wealthiest young women in the country. What about Kieran? Will he face serious charges? Given the evidence, I'd expect him to serve at least 10 years. Conspiracy, fraud, drugging someone without consent, these are serious federal crimes." As Zara and I left the law office, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Sweetheart, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "Can you meet us for dinner?" "Why would I do that?" "Because we're your family, and despite everything, we love you. You filed a guardianship petition this morning. You're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent." A pause. "That was a mistake. We can withdraw it." "Too late. I already know about the charity clause in grandfather's will." The line went silent. "You triggered it when you filed the petition," I continued. "You just forfeited any claim to grandfather's estate. That's not... You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly. You spent 4 years stealing my monthly stipend. You arranged a marriage to steal my inheritance. You drugged me to make me seem mentally unfit. And when that failed, you tried to have me legally declared incompetent. We were protecting you. From what? From financial security? From freedom? From happiness? From making mistakes with more money than you can handle. The only mistake I made was trusting you." I hung up. That evening, Zara and I celebrated at an expensive restaurant I could now afford, thanks to my unfrozen trust fund. "So what's the plan for the next 3 weeks?" she asked over champagne. "Stay unmarried. Easy since Kieran's in jail. Stay financially independent. Also easy now. And prove I'm mentally competent. That last part might be tricky with the guardianship petition. Actually, I have an idea about that." The next morning, I hired the best lawyer in the city, Jonathan Fletcher, known for handling high-profile competency cases. He reviewed my situation with professional interest. "Your parents' petition is weak," he said after reviewing the documents. "They're claiming traumatic brain injury caused paranoid delusions, but you've just exposed an actual conspiracy with documented evidence. That's the opposite of delusions." "When's the hearing?" "Next Tuesday, but I don't think it will go to trial. Once the judge sees the FBI's evidence, he'll likely dismiss the petition outright. And if he doesn't, then we present testimony from the FBI agents, the hospital staff who witnessed your lucid behavior, and expert witnesses who can attest to your mental acuity. I left Fletcher's office feeling cautiously optimistic, but that afternoon, my confidence was shaken by an unexpected visitor. Dr. Harrison Vance, the family doctor who'd helped drug me, appeared at my hotel room door. "We need to talk," he said. I kept the chain lock engaged. "I have nothing to say to you, and you shouldn't be here. Your parents are desperate," he said through the gap. "They're planning something that will hurt you more than the drugs ever could." Despite my better judgment, I was curious. "What are you talking about?" "They found out about your grandfather's real estate holdings, properties worth millions that aren't mentioned in any of the wills." "What properties?" "A vineyard in Napa, a ranch in Montana, commercial buildings in 3 cities. Your grandfather kept them under corporate names to avoid taxes." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of being their accomplice, and because they're planning to forge documents showing these properties were transferred to them before his death." I stared at him through the crack in the door. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have the original transfer documents. Your grandfather left them with me for safekeeping, along with instructions to give them to you on your 23rd birthday. He held up a manila envelope. "The properties are worth about $60 million total. Your parents don't know I have these documents. They think they're hidden in a safety deposit box they can't access." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. Dr. Vance looked older than I remembered, with deep lines around his eyes and graying hair. He seemed genuinely remorseful as he handed me the envelope. "Why did you help them drug me?" I asked. "Your father threatened to expose some mistakes I made years ago. Medical license violations that could have ruined me. I was weak. Those mistakes weren't accidents, were they?" He shook his head. "I falsified medical records for wealthy clients, covered up evidence of prescription drug abuse, things that could have sent people to prison. And now you're trying to make amends?" "I'm trying to do one right thing before this destroys us all. Your parents are planning to claim these properties were transferred to them months before your grandfather's death. They're paying someone to backdate the paperwork." I opened the envelope and found property deeds, corporate documents, and a letter from my grandfather explaining the holdings. "He suspected they would try something like this," Dr. Vance continued. "That's why he gave me the originals. He said if they ever tried to forge documents, I should give you the proof of their fraud. What's stopping me from turning you into the FBI for drugging me?" "Nothing. I expect you will. But at least this way, I'll have helped you first." After he left, I called Agent Rodriguez and arranged to meet the next morning. I also called Jonathan Fletcher to update him on this new development. "This keeps getting more complex," Fletcher said. "But it also keeps making your case stronger. Every new piece of evidence shows you're competent, and your parents are criminal." The FBI meeting was productive. Agent Rodriguez was particularly interested in the forged real estate documents Dr. Vance had warned about. "We'll investigate immediately," she said. "If they're planning to backdate transfers, we can catch them in the act." "What about Dr. Vance?" "He admitted to helping drug me. He'll face charges, but his cooperation will likely reduce his sentence. The bigger fish are your parents and Kieran." "Speaking of Kieran, has he said anything useful?" "He's been trying to plead bargain. Claims he was just following your parents' instructions and didn't understand the full scope of their plan." "Do you believe him?" "I think he was a willing participant who got greedy, but your parents were definitely the masterminds." That afternoon, I decided to visit the properties Dr. Vance had told me about. The first was a commercial building downtown that housed several restaurants and offices. The property manager, a friendly woman named Patricia, was surprised to see me. "You must be Theodore's granddaughter," she said. "You look just like him. Are you here about the transfer papers your parents filed?" My blood ran cold. "What transfer papers?" "They brought documents yesterday showing the building was transferred to them last year. Said they'd be taking over management starting next month." "Can I see those documents?" Patricia pulled out a folder. The papers looked official, but the dates were clearly wrong. My grandfather had been hospitalized during the time period they claimed he'd signed the transfer. "These are fraudulent," I told Patricia. "My grandfather was in intensive care on this date. He couldn't have signed anything. Should I contact the police?" "I'll handle it. But don't process any transfers until you hear from my lawyer." I visited the other properties and found similar situations. My parents had been busy filing fraudulent transfer documents at each location. That evening, they called again. "We know you've been visiting the properties," Dad said without preamble. "You mean the properties you're trying to steal with forged documents? Those transfers are legitimate." "Really? Because grandfather was in a medically induced coma on the date you claim he signed them." Silence. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to withdraw the guardianship petition. You're going to return every penny you stole from my trust fund. And you're going to turn yourselves in to the FBI. Or what? Or I release the evidence of your document forgery to the media along with everything else. You'll be facing decades in prison instead of a few years. You're bluffing. Try me." I hung up and immediately sent copies of the forged documents to every major news outlet in the city, along with a detailed explanation of my parents' fraud. By morning, the story was front-page news. Pharmaceutical fortune family accused of massive inheritance fraud. The article detailed everything: the drugging, the fake marriage, the forged documents, the attempted theft of hundreds of millions in assets. My parents' photos were splashed across every website and newspaper. The backlash was swift. My father's pharmaceutical company's stock price plummeted. Business partners distanced themselves. Social connections evaporated. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, but I ignored them all. I had more important things to focus on. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for the next day, and I wanted to be prepared. That night, Zara helped me practice testimony and review evidence. We'd just ordered room service when someone knocked at the door. It was my younger brother Connor, whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. He looked exhausted and scared. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in, though I kept Zara close by. "Mom and Dad are losing their minds," he said without preamble. They've been fighting constantly, drinking heavily, and making increasingly desperate plans. What kind of plans? They want to claim you kidnapped me and that your mental illness is making you dangerous to family members. I stared at him. Are you serious? They asked me to lie in court tomorrow, to say you've threatened me and that I'm afraid of what you might do. And will you? Connor shook his head. I came here to warn you and to apologize. I knew something was wrong with how they were treating you, but I was too cowardly to speak up. You were 17. They're the adults. I should have protected you. I hugged my little brother, realizing how much I'd missed him during this ordeal. There's something else, Connor said. I recorded their conversation about the kidnapping lie. I thought you might need it. He played an audio file on his phone. My parents' voices were clear as they coached him on what false testimony to give. This is evidence of witness tampering, I said. The FBI needs to hear this. I know. That's why I brought it to you instead of them. The guardianship hearing the next morning was anticlimactic. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence for less than 20 minutes before addressing my parents' lawyer. Counselor, your clients are currently under federal investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and drug-related charges. The petitioner's alleged mental incompetence appears to be the result of systematic drugging by the very people seeking guardianship. This petition is not only meritless, it's offensive to this court. He turned to me. Ms. Ashworth, you've demonstrated remarkable mental acuity in uncovering and documenting a complex criminal conspiracy. I find no evidence whatsoever of mental incompetence. Petition dismissed. My parents' lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My parents themselves hadn't even shown up. They were too busy dealing with the media circus surrounding the fraud allegations. As I left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around me with cameras and microphones. Ms. Ashworth, how does it feel to expose your own parents? What will you do with your inheritance? Do you plan to press charges against your husband? I ignored them all and climbed into Zara's car. 1 more week, I said as we drove away. 1 more week until I'm 23 and this is all over. But I was wrong. It wasn't over yet. That afternoon, Agent Rodriguez called with disturbing news. Your parents have disappeared, she said. They didn't show up for their scheduled FBI interview this morning. Their lawyer says he can't reach them. What do you mean, disappeared? They withdrew a large sum of cash from their accounts yesterday and haven't been seen since. We have warrants out for their arrest. Are they considered dangerous? Given their increasingly desperate behavior, yes. You should consider protective measures until we locate them. I hired a private security firm and moved to a more secure hotel. But despite the precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. 2 days later, my instincts proved correct. I was having breakfast in my hotel room when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was my father's, but he sounded different, wild, unstable. You've destroyed everything, he said without preamble. Our business, our reputation, our family, everything. You destroyed it yourselves when you decided to steal from me. We gave you life. We raised you. We deserve something for that. You deserve prison time for drugging your own daughter. This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what we're capable of. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Enjoy your inheritance while you can. The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Rodriguez, who took the threat seriously. We're increasing security around you, she said, and we're tracking their phone. The call came from somewhere in the mountains outside the city. What could they be planning? Given their mental state and desperation, anything, but we'll find them. The next few days passed in a blur of heightened security and constant vigilance. I barely left my hotel room except for essential meetings with lawyers and investigators. 3 days before my 23rd birthday, Helena Whitmore called with an urgent request. I need you to come to the office immediately, she said. There's been a development with your grandfather's estate. I arrived with my bodyguard to find Ms. Whitmore looking troubled. I received a call this morning from someone claiming to represent your parents, she said. They're demanding I turn over all estate documents and claiming they have legal standing as Theodore's children. But they forfeited their rights when they filed the guardianship petition. Exactly. But they're threatening to contest that provision in court. They claim the charity clause is invalid because Theodore wasn't mentally competent when he added it. They already tried that with the fraudulent medical report. This is different. They claim they have witnesses who saw him in a confused state when he was making final changes to his will. I sank into a chair. Can they actually overturn the charity clause? It would be difficult, but not impossible if they can produce credible witnesses. The problem is, a court challenge could tie up your inheritance for years, even if they ultimately lose. What do you recommend? We proceed with the original plan. On your 23rd birthday, you claim your inheritance. If they want to contest it, they'll have to do it from prison. 2 days before my birthday, the FBI finally located my parents. They were hiding in a remote cabin in the mountain, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. Corporate investigators, Agent Rodriguez explained. Your parents hired them to find evidence of your grandfather's alleged mental incompetence. Did they find anything? They found something, but I don't think it's what your parents were hoping for. She showed me photographs of documents discovered in the cabin. These are your grandfather's medical records from his final months. The real ones, not the fraudulent report Dr. Vance created. They show he was completely lucid and competent right up until his death. So they actually found evidence that contradicts their own claims? Exactly. They were so desperate to find something incriminating that they didn't bother to read what they'd found. What happens now? We arrest them tomorrow. The charges are extensive: fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering, forgery, drug-related crimes, and now kidnapping your brother. Kidnapping Connor? They took him with them to the cabin against his will. He managed to call us from there yesterday. I felt a surge of protective anger toward my little brother. Is he okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally shaken, but he'll recover. He's been very helpful in our investigation. The day before my 23rd birthday, I watched on the news as my parents were arrested at their mountain hideout. They looked haggard and defeated as they were led away in handcuffs. The reporters described it as the culmination of one of the most shocking inheritance fraud cases in state history. That evening, Connor called me from Child Services. "I'm sorry," was the first thing he said. "I'm sorry I didn't stop them sooner." "You're 17, I replied. "None of this was your responsibility. What happens to me now?" "You're coming to live with me. I've already started the custody paperwork." "Really? Really? We're family. Actual family, not the toxic mess mom and dad created." "What about college?" "You'll go to whatever college you want. Money isn't an issue anymore." On the morning of my 23rd birthday, I woke up feeling strange. After months of fighting for my inheritance, the actual moment felt almost anticlimactic. Zara arrived with coffee and pastries. "Happy birthday to the newest multimillionaire," she said, grinning. "It doesn't feel real yet. It will when you see the Swiss bank account numbers." At noon, I met Helena Whitmore at her office for the official transfer ceremony. She had prepared an elaborate spread of documents covering the art collection, real estate holdings, corporate assets, and financial accounts. "The total value has actually increased since our last assessment," she said. "The art has appreciated, and several of your grandfather's technology patents have been licensed for significant fees." "How much total?" $437 million. I sat in stunned silence. "There's one more thing," Ms. Whitmore said gently. "Your grandfather recorded a video message to be played on your 23rd birthday." She turned on a television screen, and suddenly my grandfather was there, sitting in his familiar study chair. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Kind eyes, gentle smile, perfectly pressed shirt. "My dear granddaughter," his recorded voice said. "If you're watching this, it means you've survived whatever schemes your parents devised to steal your inheritance. I'm proud of you for being stronger than they anticipated." Tears started flowing down my face. "I know this journey has been painful. Learning that your own parents would betray you for money is one of life's cruelest lessons. But I hope you'll see this inheritance not as compensation for their betrayal, but as freedom from ever having to depend on anyone who doesn't truly love you." He paused and seemed to look directly at me through the screen. "Money doesn't guarantee happiness, but it does guarantee choices. You can choose to travel the world or stay home. You can choose to start a business or pursue art. You can choose to help others or focus on yourself. Most importantly, you can choose who deserves your trust and love. Use this gift wisely, but don't let it burden you. Your worth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by how you treat others and how true you stay to yourself. I love you more than you'll ever know. Now go live the life you choose, not the life others choose for you." The video ended with him smiling and raising a glass of wine in a toast. I sat sobbing for several minutes while Ms. Whitmore and Zara waited patiently. "Are you okay?" Zara finally asked. "I think so. It's just overwhelming." "What's the first thing you want to do with the money?" I thought for a moment. "Take care of Connor. Make sure he has everything he needs for college and beyond." "And after that?" I smiled through my tears. "I have no idea. But for the first time in my life, that feels like a good thing." 3 months later, I was settling into my new life. I'd bought a beautiful house in the hills outside the city. Nothing too ostentatious, but comfortable and secure. Connor had moved in and was thriving at his new private school. Kieran had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. My parents received 8 years each. Dr. Vance got 3 years and lost his medical license permanently. The media attention had mostly died down, though I still occasionally received interview requests. I turned them all down. Some stories didn't need to be told repeatedly. One afternoon, while reviewing investment portfolios with my new financial advisor, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Emma, Kieran's sister, whom I barely knew. She looked nervous and uncomfortable as she sat in my living room. "I wanted to apologize," she said without preamble. "I knew something was wrong with how Kieran was treating you, but I didn't say anything. You weren't responsible for his choices." "No, but I could have warned you. He'd done similar things before. Targeted wealthy women, manipulated them. I should have spoken up." "Why didn't you?" "Because he's my brother, and I was hoping he'd changed. That maybe he really loved you." "Did he ever?" Emma shook her head sadly. "I don't think Kieran is capable of loving anyone more than he loves money." She stood to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you exposed him. Maybe prison will give him time to figure out what kind of person he wants to be." After she left, I reflected on forgiveness. I'd forgiven Connor quickly because he was young and genuinely remorseful. I'd even forgiven Dr. Vance to some extent because his cooperation had helped solve the case. But I couldn't forgive my parents or Kieran. Some betrayals were too deep, too calculated. They'd seen me not as a daughter or wife, but as a resource to be exploited. That evening, Connor and I were making dinner together when he asked a question that had been on his mind. "Do you ever miss them? Mom and Dad?" I considered the question carefully. "I miss the people I thought they were, but I don't miss the people they actually were." "Do you think they'll try to contact us when they get out of prison?" "Maybe, but by then we'll have built our own lives. We won't need their approval or their love." "What if I want to see them?" "Then that'll be your choice to make, but you'll never have to depend on them again." 6 months after my 23rd birthday, I made my first major philanthropic decision. I established a foundation focused on helping young adults escape family financial abuse. The idea came from reading letters I received from people who'd heard my story. Dozens of young people wrote about being controlled through money, having their inheritance stolen, or being trapped in unwanted marriages for financial reasons. I hired a team of social workers, lawyers, and counselors to help people in similar situations. We provided legal assistance, financial support, and safe housing for those who needed to escape toxic family situations. The foundation's first major success was helping a 19-year-old woman named Maya escape an arranged marriage her parents had planned to secure a business partnership. We provided her with legal representation, a scholarship to college, and a safe place to live while she built her independence. Her gratitude letter reminded me why I'd started the foundation. You gave me the chance to choose my own life instead of living the one chosen for me. A year after claiming my inheritance, I was asked to speak at a conference about family financial abuse. I'd avoided public speaking about my experience, but this felt important. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of social workers, lawyers, and survivors, I shared my story publicly for the first time. Family financial abuse is invisible to most people, I began. We assume parents want the best for their children, that spouses love each other, that families protect their own. But for some of us, family members are the predators we need protection from. I talked about the warning signs: parents who control adult children's finances, family members who push inappropriate marriages, relatives who isolate someone from outside support systems. The hardest part isn't escaping, I continued. It's accepting that people who claim to love you are actually exploiting you. It's grieving the family you thought you had while building the life you deserve. After my speech, a young man approached me with tears in his eyes. My grandmother is trying to force me to marry her friend's daughter so she can combine business interests, he said. I thought I was trapped, but your story gives me hope. We connected him with the foundation's resources that same day. 2 years after my 23rd birthday, I received a letter that changed my perspective on everything. It was from my mother, written from prison. My dear daughter, it began. I know you have no reason to believe anything I write, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. She explained that prison had given her time to understand what she'd done. She'd been in therapy, working through her own childhood trauma and her unhealthy relationship with money. I won't make excuses for our behavior, she wrote, but I want you to understand that my parents controlled me through money the same way I tried to control you. I thought I was protecting you from making financial mistakes, but I was really just continuing a cycle of abuse. She described her own experiences of being married off young to secure her family's business interests, of having her inheritance stolen by relatives, of never learning to value herself as more than a financial asset. I became so focused on securing your financial future that I forgot about your emotional well-being. I thought if you had money, you'd be safe. I didn't realize that taking away your choices was the opposite of safety. The letter ended with a request. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But if you're ever willing to listen, I'd like to tell you about your great-grandmother, who started this cycle of financial abuse in our family. Maybe understanding the history will help you heal from it. I set the letter aside and didn't respond for weeks. But eventually, curiosity won out. I arranged a supervised visit at the prison. My mother looked older, grayer, and somehow smaller than I remembered. She seemed genuinely shocked that I'd come. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, she said. I'm not sure either, but I want to understand. She told me about my great-grandmother, a woman who'd survived the Great Depression by manipulating her children's marriages and inheritances. How that trauma had shaped my grandmother, who'd controlled my mother the same way my mother had tried to control me. It was always about survival, she explained. In my family, love was measured by financial security. If you weren't ensuring someone's financial future, you weren't really loving them, but you were destroying my future, not securing it. I see that now. But at the time, I genuinely believed I was protecting you from making the same mistakes I'd made. What mistakes? Trusting the wrong people, being too generous, not understanding the value of money. I shook my head. Those aren't mistakes. Those are human qualities. I know that now. We talked for 2 hours. I didn't forgive her. That would take much longer if it ever happened. But I began to understand her. Over the next year, I visited her several more times. Slowly, I started to see glimpses of the mother I'd thought I had as a child, before greed and fear had consumed her. During one visit, she asked about Connor. He's thriving, I said. He's at Stanford now, studying engineering. He wants to develop renewable energy technology. And he's happy. Very. He has friends, hobbies, a girlfriend he adores. He's living the life of a normal college student. Without financial pressure? Without any pressure. He knows the money is there if he needs it, but he's working part-time and living in regular dorms. He wants to earn his own way. My mother smiled sadly. That's what I should have wanted for both of you. 3 years after claiming my inheritance, I made a decision that surprised everyone. I got married. His name was David, and he was a public defender I'd met through the foundation. He had no money, no powerful connections, and no interest in my wealth beyond ensuring it was used for good causes. Aren't you worried about prenups and gold diggers? Zara asked when I told her about the engagement. David didn't even know about my inheritance until our 5th date, I replied. And when I told him, his first reaction was to ask how much of it I was giving away. That's how you know he's a keeper. The wedding was small and private. Just Connor, Zara, a few close friends, and David's family. No media, no elaborate dress, no pharmaceutical executives looking for business opportunities. As we exchanged vows in my backyard garden, I reflected on how different this marriage was from the one I'd escaped. This one was my choice. David was my choice. The life we'd build together would be our choice. During the reception, Connor gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. My sister taught me that family isn't about blood or money, he said. It's about people who support your dreams instead of trying to control them. People who celebrate your successes instead of trying to steal them. People who love you for who you are, not what you can give them. He raised his glass. To David and my sister, may your marriage be everything theirs wasn't. 4 years after claiming my inheritance, I received another letter from prison. This one was from my father. Unlike my mother's letter, his was not apologetic. It was bitter, accusatory, and filled with justifications for his behavior. He blamed me for destroying the family business, claimed I was ungrateful for everything they'd provided, and suggested that I owed them compensation for raising me. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, he wrote. The least you could do is help your parents who gave you life. I showed the letter to my therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, whom I'd been seeing regularly since claiming my inheritance. How does reading this make you feel? She asked. Sad. Not for him, but for the relationship we never had. He still sees me as a resource, not as his daughter. Do you want to respond? No. There's nothing I could say that would make him understand what he did wrong. He's not interested in accountability, just in getting access to my money again. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with protecting myself from it. 5 years after my 23rd birthday, the foundation had helped over 300 people escape family financial abuse. We'd expanded to include educational programs, legal clinics, and emergency housing assistance. Maya, the young woman we'd helped escape an arranged marriage, was now working as a counselor for the foundation while finishing her social work degree. You changed my life, she told me during our annual staff meeting. You changed your own life, I replied. I just gave you some tools. No, you gave me something more important than tools. You gave me permission to value my own happiness over other people's expectations. That phrase stayed with me. Permission to value my own happiness. It was something I'd never had growing up, something I'd had to learn to give myself. 6 years later, David and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Hope. As I held her in the hospital, I made a promise that she would never be treated as a commodity or a business investment. She'll make her own choices, I whispered to David. About her career, her relationships, her life. We'll support whatever makes her happy, even if she wants to give away all her inheritance to save the whales, David asked with a smile. Especially then, Connor, now a successful engineer working on solar panel technology, came to visit his new niece. He'd graduated from Stanford debt-free and was living in his own apartment, completely financially independent. She's beautiful, he said, holding Hope carefully, and lucky. She'll grow up knowing she's valued for who she is, not what she owns. That's the plan. Think Mom and Dad will ever get to meet her? It was a question I'd been considering. My mother would be eligible for parole in 2 years. My father wouldn't get out for another 4. Maybe Mom, eventually, if she continues making progress in therapy. But not Dad. Some risks aren't worth taking. 7 years after claiming my inheritance, I received news that Dr. Vance had died of a heart attack while serving his prison sentence. I felt conflicted about his death, anger for what he'd done to me, but also sadness for a man who'd clearly struggled with his conscience. His daughter contacted me to arrange a meeting. She wanted to apologize for her father's actions and to return something he'd asked her to give me. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was a physician herself, working in pediatric oncology. My father was consumed by guilt in his final years, she told me. He knew what he'd done to you was unforgivable, but he wanted you to have this. She handed me a small wooden box. Inside was a locket that had belonged to my grandmother, my grandfather's first wife, who died when my mother was young. He said your grandfather had given it to him for safekeeping, with instructions to pass it to you someday. He never found the right opportunity, but he didn't want it to be lost. The locket contained a photo of my grandmother and a small note from my granddaughter, who I hope will be braver than I was. I wore the locket to Hope's first birthday party, feeling connected to a grandmother I'd never known, but who'd apparently understood the importance of courage. 8 years after my 23rd birthday, my mother was granted parole. She called to ask if she could see me and meet her granddaughter. I agreed to one supervised meeting at the foundation's offices, with Connor present. She looked frail and older than her years, but her eyes were different, clearer, more genuine than I remembered. I don't expect forgiveness, she said immediately. I just wanted to see that you're happy. I am happy. And Connor? Successful, independent, and happy too. She nodded, tears in her eyes. That's all I really wanted for both of you. I just went about it in the most destructive way possible. She asked to see a photo of Hope, and I showed her several on my phone. She's beautiful. Does she know about me? She knows she has a grandmother who made serious mistakes, but is trying to make amends. When she's older, I'll let her decide if she wants a relationship with you. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve. It's about giving Hope the choice to know her family history and decide what role, if any, you play in her life. We met a few more times over the following months. My mother was clearly working hard to understand and atone for her actions. She'd completed multiple therapy programs in prison and was working at a nonprofit that helped women transition back into society after incarceration. But trust was something that would take years to rebuild, if it ever could be. 9 years after claiming my inheritance, I published a book about my experiences. Choosing Freedom, Breaking Cycles of Family Financial Abuse became a bestseller and brought national attention to an often ignored form of domestic abuse. I donated all proceeds to the foundation and used the book tour as an opportunity to speak about family financial control and manipulation. During a television interview, the host asked if I'd ever regretted exposing my parents. I regret that it was necessary, I replied. I regret that they made choices that forced me to choose between my safety and my family, but I don't regret protecting myself. What would you say to someone currently in a similar situation? That your life belongs to you. Your choices belong to you. Your happiness belongs to you. Anyone who tries to control those things through money or manipulation doesn't love you. They're using you. And if they claim they're doing it out of love, love doesn't require you to sacrifice your autonomy. Love doesn't demand you accept abuse. Love supports your choices, even when they're different from what others would choose. 10 years after my 23rd birthday, I stood in the same church where I'd faked my amnesia. But this time, I was there for Connor's wedding to his college girlfriend, Aria. As I watched them exchange vows they'd written themselves, I marveled at how different his experience was from mine. No arranged marriage, no family pressure, no hidden agenda. Just two people who'd chosen each other freely. During his speech at the reception, Connor thanked me for showing him what healthy family relationships looked like. My sister taught me that family members should want you to be happy, not obedient, he said. That they should celebrate your successes, not try to steal them. That they should support your dreams, not try to control them. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. She broke a cycle of abuse that had lasted for generations in our family. Because of her courage, my children will grow up knowing they're valued for who they are, not what they can provide to others. As I watched Hope, now 3 years old, dancing with her new Aunt Aria, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The cycle was truly broken. Hope would grow up in a family that prioritized her well-being over financial gain, her happiness over others' expectations, her autonomy over their control. That night, David and I put Hope to bed and sat on our porch, looking out over the garden we'd built together. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he'd posed on previous anniversaries of my inheritance claim. "None," I replied, and for the first time, I meant it completely. I'd lost the family I thought I had, but I'd gained something more valuable. The family I'd chosen, the life I'd built, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to protect both. My grandfather had been right in his final video message. The inheritance wasn't about the money. It was about freedom. The freedom to choose who deserved my love, who earned my trust, and how I wanted to live my life. As I sat there with my husband and daughter safe inside our home, I realized that the most important thing I'd inherited wasn't money or property or art. It was the understanding that I deserved to be loved for who I was, not what I could provide to others. And that knowledge, more than any amount of money, had set me truly free.